Were Macedonians Greek? Well, it depends on three things. What time period are you talking about? Who are you asking? And whether you believe if you identify as something, you become that thing. Now, I made a short TikTok about this and, well, the comments were less than nice. Wrong sources you read, brother. Read some real history. Bro source, trust me. You are paid to say these nonsense sentences. Greeks were living all around the Mediterranean borders and had the right to participate in the Olympic Games. So let's start with this story about the Macedonian king Alexander I and his troubles in trying to enter the Olympic Games of either 500 or 496 BC. We're not quite sure. Firstly, why was it so important to enter the Olympiad in the first place? Well, for your city, state or kingdom to take part, it proves your country's legitimacy. It's a sign that you're part and you've been accepted into the broader Greek world, in contrast to the barbarism that lies beyond. And thus, for an up-and-coming kingdom like Macedonia, taking part would be a huge step for them becoming integrated into the economically and culturally powerful Greek South. Well, the story goes, the Macedonian king Alexander I, note not Alexander the Great, he was the third Alexander of the Macedonian line. Well, he had terrible trouble trying to enter the Olympic Games. As a young king wanting to prove himself in front of the other Greek city-states, he wanted to enter the stage sprint, which is about 200 yards long. Herodotus in Book 5, Chapter 22 writes, "For when Alexander wished to contend in the games and had come to Olympia with no other view, the Greeks who were about to run against him would have excluded him from the contest, saying that Greeks only were allowed to contend and not barbarians." But Alexander proved himself to be an Argive and was distinctly adjudged a Greek, after which he entered the lists for the foot race and was drawn to run in the first pair. Thus, this matter settled. What does this incident say about the perceived Greekness of Macedonians? Well, Adrian Goldsworthy writes, "What is interesting is the implication that simply being a Macedonian was not enough to prove that a man was Greek, at least in the tense environment of the Olympic competition." What's even more interesting is Alexander became known as a Philhellene, a foreigner who was obsessed with Greek culture but wasn't necessarily Greek himself. He brought gold statues to Zeus and Apollo in Olympia. Later, Archelaus I created a Greek-style festival to honor Zeus at Dion, held his own mock Olympic Games, convinced Euripides to come over and write a play about the foundational story of the Argiads, confirming the Greek origin of the Macedonian royal family. And when that famous Athenian playwright died, his remains were kept by Macedonians despite Athens' pleas, suggesting, according to Adrian Goldsworthy, that this behavior marks these Macedonians as revering Hellenic culture but not quite part of it. Why would this be the case? Well, during this time period, the traditional golden age of ancient Greece, which was around 500 BC till about, say, 400 BC, especially, we need to remember that one key part of Greek identity is simply being a civilized person, someone who isn't a barbarian. And Macedonians were very different from the southern city-states, let's say. Firstly, it was not a city-state, rather it was a kingdom ruling over multiple non-self-governing communities and various urban centres. Goldsworthy writes, "Macedonia was always different in country and culture, and from a southern Greek perspective, it was backwards. City-states did not develop there, and the only recognisable polis in or near the kingdom were colonies settled by people from outside." Furthermore, to be Greek is to be free from archaic kings. This practice of absolute monarchy was considered archaic and foreign, and to city-states like Athens, political institutions mattered quite a lot. And it's also important to note how barbaric most of Macedonia was. When Philip II finally properly took over Upper Macedonia, about a century after this time, it was a pastoral society without walled cities, towns, or even cultivated cultivation of the land. Alexander the Great later remarked how it was his father Philip who changed Macedonians from wanderers to city dwellers, herdsmen to farmers, and replaced their animal skins with civilized cloaks. Language-wise, there was also a huge transformation during this time. Their own very distinctive dialect, which had not been well documented at all, so we don't really know much about it, was replaced by Attic Greek from the south, and it was pushed onto everyone by the nobility and the aristocracy. On the other hand, when Darius the Great invaded in about 500 BC, he made a list about his subject people, and Macedon was put under the same category as the Ionians, so Persians at least thought they were Greek, and in the myths they were indeed part of the broader Greek world, as evidenced by the Greek poet Hesiod, who wrote a myth about a boy called Macedon who was the son of Zeus, and he gave the region the name Macedonia. It's apparent, I think, from the perspective of what we typically think of as ancient Greece, despite Macedonian nobility really wanting to be Greek, from the point of view of the Greek city-states, Athens especially, they saw Macedonians as being too barbaric, antiquated in their ways to be Greek. It was only by force of arms, by becoming the hegemon and the leader of the Greeks in the Persia campaign, in what Goldsworthy describes as the Great Hellenic War of Revenge, only did the rest of the Greek world grudgingly accept them as being Greek. And thus I urge everyone to cast suspicion upon anyone who says that Macedonians were definitely Greek.